Hey guys, it's Sean here from Microbudget Film Lab, and I wanted to talk this week about marketing for your microbudget feature film. I mentioned last week in the post I did about distribution that the question of distribution in many ways is solved. There's a lot of options out there. We went with a sales agent. Sales agent takes a commission, they charge you expenses, of course, and they can then get you up on multiple platforms. We're on Amazon in a number of countries. We're being placed on Roku. We're in China on China Mobile. A distributor can do many of the same things, Seco broadcasters and so on. Or you could go with an aggregator, a digital aggregator like Gravitas Ventures or Distributor, and you can pay them a fee up front to get you placed on different distribution platforms, or you can DIY it and just do it all yourself on one platform or two platforms, YouTube, Distrify, VHX, Gumroad, all kinds of options that exist. But really in all those instances, in terms of generating revenue, you still have to drive the marketing. You still have to drive the eyeballs to see your movie. So how do you do that? Because of course that's easier said than done. And part of the problem that people have, I think, is they think about it wrongly. And I should say here as a disclaimer that most of my ideas come not from me, not from my own brilliance. They come from a filmmaker and writer and consultant named John Reis, who does a lot of, he does workshops and so on. And his name is spelled R-E-I-S-S, and his first name is Jon, and you can check out his stuff at johnreis.com. He's written a number of books. I read a book of his a number of years ago that goes into tons of detail that I obviously can't cover here, and it is worth reading, called Think Outside the Box Office, in which he talks about strategies in sort of the digital age. And he's continued to develop his ideas. And one of his particularly novel ideas is the creation of a new kind of producer called a producer of marketing and distribution, which I will come back to. But first I want to talk about the core sort of idea that he begins with in talking about how to distribute your independently made movie, and that is the idea of taking advantage of the niche market, or what he calls the long tail. And you'll see, I've put up this image here. You can see why it looks like a long tail. It looks kind of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex standing on its hind legs with the tail out behind it. And that tall part represents, on the y-axis, represents the audience size, and then on the bottom part is the audiences, the various audiences, and I've given a couple of 3 sample segmented audiences out of that long tail, because there are many audiences and the segments would be, very small because there are so many potential niche audiences that exist out there. And people tend to look at the big prize, which is that enormous audience, that peak on the left-hand side of the graph, and think, that's where I need to target because that's where the most people are. And in fact, that's the wrong way to go, because that audience is a general audience, and the only way to reach that audience is if you have a large enough marketing budget that you can do saturation advertising. And of course you don't, otherwise you wouldn't be making a micro-budget film. It would be weird to shoot a movie for $5,000 and then spend $150 million on marketing, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe somebody has done that. But well, I guess they kind of did that with Paranormal Activity, right? They shot it for nothing, and then when it got picked up, they spent huge amounts of money on the marketing. But that's not usually what happens, and that's probably not what's going to happen for you. So you need to think about how you're going to reach your niche audience. And so you have to really drill down to who they are. And this is what John Reis goes into in considerable detail in his book. You need to not think about, oh, well, my film is good for, targeted towards people, young men in the range of 18 to 22, or women between the ages of 35 and 50. That's an abstraction, and that abstraction you cannot reach unless you can be in all the places that those target audiences are, which means covering subway cars, billboards, advertising on TV, and so on. You can't do that. So what you need to do is figure out who that core audience is, and that core audience, of course, in some ways it's easier with documentaries, because documentaries are already sort of targeted. If it's, the Al Gore documentaries on climate change, for instance, you can, think about targeting people who give money to Greenpeace, or who like Greenpeace on Facebook, members of the Sierra Club, so on and so forth, World Wildlife Fund, and so on, and things like that. It's not so simple with narrative film all the time because you're not exactly thinking in those terms. And I don't want to suggest to people that you write movies specifically for a niche market in mind. You may want to do that, or you may be part of a niche market. You maybe are, Christian, very religious, involved in the Baptist Church or the Catholic Church or whatever, and it's some specific aspect of the Catholic Church or the Baptist Church. And so you're speaking to that niche audience, and that can be really helpful because you understand where to find those people because that's your interest and your passion, or you're a bowler and you're really into bowling and you bowl every week. You can find those people. But even if you're not specifically rooted in the organizations and the networking community of a specific niche audience, you should nonetheless think about the ways that you can target people. And often it's obvious and oftentimes it's not so obvious. So for instance, if your film is about a murder mystery that takes place amongst yo-yo enthusiasts, yo-yo aficionados who are really into yo-yos and the whole sport, art, I'm not sure. But really into all the aspects of walk the dog and all the different things you can do, all the tricks you can do with yo-yos. You can then think about how to target those people and think about where do they socialize in terms of online, in terms of the digital world. Is it Facebook, is it Instagram, is it Snapchat, is it all of those things, is it somewhere else? Where do you find those kinds of people? Is your audience located on Pinterest, for instance? Maybe it's, I don't know what, hobbyists. Maybe there's a hobbyist element to your storyline. So you really need to drill down, think about all the aspects, and specifically the ones that are highlighted in your movie, and then think about the niche audience that you can connect to. Now, of course, the ideal world, you'd have a crossover film that would connect with that audience, and of course, even niches of the most well-defined character, those people don't just talk to themselves. They have jobs, they have family, they have friends who aren't just, cosplay people. They're not just surfers or skateboarders or what have you. They also talk to those, and you want, hopefully, that the momentum of your film will begin to cross over and you'll get some impact that way. But even if you don't, those niches, you tend to think of them as small. You're like, oh, well, there are only 5,000 people. Well, oh my goodness, if 5,000 people rent your movie, you've potentially paid for it, especially if you're doing a DIY distribution model in terms of putting it up through, part of Amazon. You can do Amazon Direct Video or on Gumroad or whatever. You can reach those people. That would be an enormous breakthrough for you as a filmmaker, that you sold or rented your movie to 5,000 people. If it's like, if you're renting it for $5 each and you're getting 70% of that, I don't know what that is, but say $3.50 or so, $3.50 times $5,000, you're making, $17,500, and that could be well more than you made your movie for. You could recoup your money from that. So you need to not fetishize thinking, oh, well, there's only 5,000 people here, and most niches, even like really small niches, are bigger than that. And there's 2 billion people here who are between the ages of 21 and 35, because you can't reach those people anyway. Target that niche. Now that brings me to the question of a producer of marketing and distribution, which John Reese talks about again in some detail, and it has come up. And I just read something recently on his blog, I believe. It was about it kind of experiencing a resurgence, the idea of having a producer of marketing and distribution. It's a nice idea. It's often hard to reach, but if you can find somebody who's passionate about marketing, who understands social media platforms and so on, it can be really good to have this person on the producing team, and their job is to bottom line that process of building marketing momentum. You want to start as early as possible. And if you can't get a PMD, don't, kick yourself because you can't, from the very first moment, sustain a marketing campaign through pre-production and production and post-production and so on. But if you can find somebody who's interested in doing that, it's great, because then they can be thinking the whole time about developing all the content that you need to begin to connect with your potential audience and whoever they might be, and in the places they might be, and to research that and to find them and so on. And that becomes then their job, getting you making sure there's still photos on set and behind the scenes footage and interviews, and then developing a marketing strategy? You know, are you going to advertise on Facebook or Instagram or both? Because Facebook, of course, owns Instagram now. Or are you going to advertise on other platforms like Snapchat or through Google, through SEO, so on and so forth? They're going to think about those things while your other producers are thinking about things like the organizational details and raising money and that sort of thing, and pulling all that together. And this person can play an incredibly important role. As I say, they're hard to find, especially for free, because it's one of those things like everybody wants to be a filmmaker because it's sexy, or a movie star. Not everybody wants to do marketing, and if they do marketing, it's there's such a huge economy to marketing that people can find work and get paid for it. So they don't need to, they're less inclined to want and to need to build their chops through doing stuff for free with a filmmaker who's just starting out. So it can be hard to find that. You may have to do it yourself, or of your team, somebody's going to have to just take that on or divide up that labor. But if you can do it, it's a really great way to make sure that somebody is really thinking about all the ways to get your movie out there, targeting that niche audience, digging deep into a relatively small group of people who are reachable through clear locations. People tend to aggregate in clear places. Cosplay people also tend to break down into their own subgroups, and they tend to be in very clear places on websites and blogs and so on. And that allows you then a third element, which is to find people who are influencers within that niche, because those people, those influencers, if you can get them to watch your movie, if you can some way connect with them, they can help you also get the word out. So that's for this week. Next week, I'm going to talk about other elements of the marketing. I'm going to talk a bit about Facebook advertising and what you can do, the power of Facebook advertising, because I'm most familiar with that, to help you out in terms of a marketing strategy. And if you have any questions, for sure get back to me. And I should say that my blog, microbudgetfilmlab.com, if you're seeing this on YouTube, for instance, go to the blog and I'll have links to John Reese and to where you can buy his book through his website or through Amazon. You can get his book as an ebook, as a downloadable book. Thinking Outside the Box Office. As I say, it's a really good read and goes into much more detail than I've gone here. It can really help you in terms of a marketing and distribution strategy. So that's all for this week, and look forward to talking to you next week.